Good evening and welcome to the 143rd Street public meeting for Phase 1 engineering studies. I hope everyone is doing well and you are all healthy and safe. My name is Khurshid Hoda and I'm the Director of Engineering and Programs at the Village of Orland Park. This is a very important project for us. The 143rd Street widening is a very important project for the village, as well as it's a regional project that serves many other communities, especially that it's one of the two east-west corridors that connects 355 to 294. The first one is 159th, and this is the second one, 143rd Street. So we'll be talking quite a bit more detail about this project in the next few minutes or so. This is an IDOT project, as many of you know. If not, then we will discuss that in a few more minutes. But also, Village is leading this project and Village is fully committed to this project. And you will see that how our commitment has been carrying through for the last several years. And we intend to carry it through to a point where hopefully IDOT will fund the project and we will actually be able to build this project. I'm going to next introduce you to Matt Huffman. Matt is the project manager and engineer for this project with Christopher B. Burke. And Matt will walk us through the presentation for this project, as well as the public meeting process, which started on December 10th, and it will go through January 11th. So at this time, I'll hand it over to Matt. Matt, here you are.
Thank you, Khurshid. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you again, Khurshid. And thank you for everyone for taking the time to join us tonight to talk about the 143rd Street project. So tonight we're here to provide a live presentation of project materials for the proposed improvements to 143rd Street, as Khurshid mentioned, and have a dialogue with meeting participants. All the materials viewed during the presentation are located on the virtual public meeting webpage at www.143rdstreetproject.com. Normally we would have an in-person meeting, open house type meeting. However, due to our circumstances with COVID, we have had to adapt to conducting our public outreach for this project virtually. So obviously, as we all know, I think many of us become familiar with Zoom. So we are going to be doing all of our outreach for the foreseeable future via Zoom. But more than likely, we can set up one-on-one Zoom meetings with folks as needed, or phone calls and whatnot. So we're committed to reaching out and talking to every single person that's interested in this project. All the project materials are posted, as I mentioned, on the public meeting webpage for 1 month from December 10th to January 11th. And we're here to seek comments on the project. So it's important to know that we are always available to discuss the project throughout the entire project duration, just not now during the public meeting and tonight. So we're here to always address questions, concerns that people have about the project. And this project is for the people. It's for the public, for the residents of Orland Park, and for the motorists that travel the 143rd Street corridor. So tonight's meeting, real quickly going through the agenda, we're going to introduce the project team real quick. We're going to review meeting guidelines and how you can participate in tonight's meeting. Then we'll spend some time walking through the project exhibits, which are located on the public meeting webpage, or the same exact ones. And we'll go through a project overview, project information, the proposed improvement, land acquisition, and how to submit comments and questions. And then next, we'll transition after that to answering questions, both submitted written tonight via the Q&A chat box, the Q&A box, as well as verbal comments and questions as well after that. And we will stay on the call until we answer all questions and comments. So here's introductions in our project team. Khurshid is the Director of Engineering Programs and Services, Sean Marquez, the Village Engineer, and Shalyn Gallagher, the Management Analyst for the project. And to complete the first phase of engineering, the village engaged an engineering consultant firm, Christopher B. Burke Engineering. We're out of Rosemont, and participating in tonight's meeting is Mike Makovic, our Vice President and head of our Phase 1 Engineering Department, myself, Matt Huffman, who's the project manager, Phil Santos, who's our lead project engineer, Julia Negocian is also a project engineer. David Kleinwachter is our lead drainage engineer. And we've also had several sub-consultants that have helped out with this project. So other companies that we've hired as part of the project team, Huff and Huff Incorporated, who helped with our noise analysis and special waste, Wang Engineering, who performed our geotechnical investigations. You may have seen them out on site in June and July of this year collecting soil borings, and Terra Engineering, who helped us perform traffic counts. So covering some just brief guidelines, I'll try and go through these real quick. But just with the whole Zoom format, things are a little bit different and a little bit more complicated with engaging with people. It's harder to have one-on-one conversations as we normally would have in an open house type meeting. But we are recording this presentation for inclusion in the meeting documentation, and this presentation will be posted to the virtual public meeting webpage. I'll hopefully get through all this material in about 20 to 25 minutes before we start answering folks' questions and providing an opportunity for public statements, verbal public statements and questions. For everyone here, everyone is muted and your videos are off. So we, as the project team, we have the ability to unmute people to talk. So we'll cover that later on how to do that. And then questions can be submitted anytime during the presentation using the Q&A dialog box. And I'll cover that in a brief second. And we'll be answering these questions following the presentation. And some questions might be answered during the project team tonight, but depending on the questions we get, if they're very detailed in nature, we might not be able to answer them this evening, and we'll have to follow up with the meeting participant who had that question either after this meeting to provide an answer. On this slide, we would ask that you contact the project team if you do have any detailed individual questions about your property. For example, if you want to confirm with the project team what the land acquisition might be from your property, we can set up a time to either do another Zoom call or mail you an exhibit or talk to you over the phone to go over that in detail and show you. But tonight for this meeting, it's going to be hard to get to that level of detail to answer questions, but we'll do the best we can this evening. But the best way to contact the project team is to submit a question via the virtual public meeting webpage. And if you go to the website, scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see this dialog box to the right of this slide. And you can type in your name, your email address, and your comment or question. This automatically then, as soon as you submit it, it generates an email that goes to us, the project team, and the village. And then we can set up a time to address your question or comment. Lastly, on meeting guidelines, verbal comments and questions can be made by meeting participants. To do that, we're going to do that later on in the meeting. You use the raised hand feature. So in Zoom, there's a little button at the bottom of your page, and you can click raise hand. And that will tell us, that'll be the way we know if someone would like to speak, verbally speak. And at the appropriate time, we'll then unmute you and you'll be allowed to speak. And like I said, some questions may require further review. And if your question isn't answered today appropriately, we are committed to answering all questions that we receive. And we'll be, like I said, reaching out to folks after the meeting to provide answers. And also, we'd ask that you please not hold conversations in the Q&A box, as we are going to include the Q&A dialogue as part of the public meeting record. This is a quick screen grab of what you are seeing on your screen. And like I said, at the bottom of your page, the first item is the chat box, which we aren't using. The only time we would use that if we would need to communicate if there's any technical difficulties or whatnot with the entire participant group here tonight. Next is the raised hand button. So like I said, that's going to be used to indicate if you would like to make a verbal comment. So we're going to be keeping track of that throughout the meeting here and taking a log of people. We're going to do the best we can to try and let people talk in the order they submitted their, in the order they raised their hand. So if someone raised their hand right now, hopefully we're going to do our best to try and have you go first during the verbal portion of the meeting. But it's, with the Zoom platform, it's not the easiest thing to figure that out. So we have someone watching that and making a list of the order which people raise their hand. If your question was answered, you can lower your hand by clicking the button again. And then the last button is the Q&A dialog box, which will be utilized throughout the meeting, like I said, for participants to ask questions, and we'll answer those immediately following the presentation. So any written comments, we'll go through those first. And all meeting participants will be able to see questions asked by others. And some questions may warrant a response immediately by the project team, like if you're having a technical difficulty or you can't hear something, you can write that question in the comment box and our team will respond to you privately. We'll send you a private chat to help address that question you may have. And then lastly, at the top right, up here, use my feature here, up here, you have the ability to enter full screen view for the presentation. So with that, we're going to start entering the exhibit walkthrough. So this is the main portion of our meeting this evening. And then following this, like I said, we'll get into the Q&A. Project overview. Like Rashid mentioned, the village leadership is taking part in a multi-jurisdictional effort to improve 143rd Street to widen it to 5 lanes from I-355 on the west to Cicero Avenue on the east, a distance of 15 miles. Currently, 8.9 miles of the corridor have already been improved to 5 lanes, which are shown in blue on the below on the exhibit here. So these portions of blue are already 5 lanes. So you can, or as many know, from LaGrange Road and even, Main Street, Ravinia, all the way east to Cicero is already 5 lanes. But portions of the project are 5 lanes to the west. So currently 8.9 miles of the corridor have already been improved, like I mentioned, which are shown in blue, and 2.6 miles are within Orland Park from Beacon Avenue, just west of the Metra, just west of the Southwest Highway Service Line to the village limits. So that's this portion. Oh, sorry about that. That's this portion over here. The areas shown in yellow are currently in phase 2 engineering design, which are all planned to be widened to 5 lanes. So you'll see those portions in yellow, which are currently in the engineering process ahead of this project. And the village is currently in phase 2 engineering design for improvements to 143rd Street from Woolcook Road to Wolf Road. So the project, this area right here, just to the yellow portion, just west of our green box here, which is our project study area, which is our study area is a 1.7 mile section of 143rd Street from Wolf Road to Southwest Highway on the east. And right now this road is existing 2 to 3 lanes and experiences significant congestion, safety issues, mobility deficiencies, roadway flooding, lacks continuous sidewalks and paths. Moving on to the project development process. So the engineering process, it does take some time to get through. We are currently in phase 1, and that is what we call preliminary engineering and environmental studies, which is the first step of the process. And we really, at this point, investigate the transportation needs and solutions for the project. The phase 1 study is anticipated to be completed in the spring of 2021. The village will be advancing the project into phase 2 engineering in mid-2021. That phase 2 engineering will take about 18 months to obtain substantial completion for that portion of the design. Phase 2 engineering really consists of the contract plan and preparation and will be funded with a combination of federal, state, and local funds. At this time, the village has not identified funding for land acquisition, which is targeted to begin in 2023 or 2024, and typically takes about 18 months. So, from now to then, the village is going to be actively pursuing, working with IDOT, trying to obtain federal funding to help pay for the land acquisition. Funding for construction has also not been identified. When funding is identified for construction, that will begin following the completion of land acquisition, and construction will likely be multi-year, 24 months duration. And also, so everyone is aware, based on funding availability, the village may decide to phase the implementation of the project, meaning we would break this larger project up into smaller pieces to construct them one at a time. If maybe only 25% of the construction funding is available, we would try and utilize that and advance a piece of the project to construction. So with a project of this size, that is not uncommon, just because it's hard to obtain all the funding at one time and get that all lined up. Currently, the remaining unfunded project cost for land acquisition, construction, and construction engineering is about $56 million. So it's a very large project. And like I said, the village is actively seeking state and federal funding for this important regional project. Moving on to the phase one study process. So this is looking at the phase one study and what we have to go through. The objective of the phase one study is to start with identification of the project, identifying the project's purpose and need. We then prepare a range of alternatives to address those identified needs. Then we move on to identifying a preferred alternative, and then we move to preparing the final engineering reports, phase one engineering reports. So you can see we are here, over here at the public meeting. So this is our main public engagement piece of the phase one process. So, and the purpose of this meeting is really to inform the project stakeholders about the identified preferred alternative design and seek comments. And the project team has developed, this proposed improvement that meets the needs of the project. It complies with current Illinois Department of Transportation, IDOT, and federal guidelines, minimizes impacts to biological and historically sensitive areas. And also we really try to minimize private property impacts as much as we can. So we've gone through that process. So what you're seeing here tonight is a proposed improvement that currently meets all federal and state guidelines, and we've obtained all the environmental and historic cultural clearances for the project. And now we're seeking public input and comment on the proposed improvement. And so after tonight's meeting, what we'll do is we'll work through comments, make design tweaks as needed, and then we'll move on to preparing the final phase one engineering project report, which will be submitted to Illinois Department of Transportation for final approval. And then once that approval is made, the village can then move on to the next phase of engineering, phase two. Moving into station two, which is the project information. The first exhibit we're going to go through here is traffic information. And this is one of the initial steps of the project development process, is identifying the transportation issues and needs. This exhibit shows several pieces of information. Roadway jurisdiction, which is indicated by the label below the street name. So for example, 143rd Street, you will see right here, we have IDOT. So 143rd Street is under IDOT jurisdiction. As is, if you notice, Wolf Road over here, the south leg of Wolf Road is under IDOT jurisdiction. 108th Avenue, south of 143rd Street, is Cook County jurisdiction. The Village of Orland Park has jurisdiction of all local streets, such as West Avenue, Beacon, 108th north of 143rd Street. But for the majority of this project, 143rd Street is under IDOT jurisdiction, as I mentioned, and is marked Illinois Route 7. The average daily traffic, which is shown for existing conditions and future year 2040 conditions, is also provided. So these are the numbers in the boxes here. So the top box is the existing traffic, and the bottom box is the projected traffic. The traffic projections are obtained from the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, which is the Chicago Area Planning Agency. And we obtain the traffic projections for the design year, which is currently 2040. This information, the design year traffic, is utilized for analysis and the overall design of the project. So when we design an intersection, we're not designing it to accommodate traffic that we have today. We're designing it for the traffic that we're anticipating to come in the future. So usually it's about a 25 to 30 year lookout. And that's when we're making this significant of an investment in a project, in an infrastructure project. We want to make sure it's going to last for a long time. So the big main point of this exhibit is really that the existing traffic, the average daily traffic, which is the amount of cars that travel the road in one day on average, is about 14,600 vehicles. By the year 2040, we're anticipating that to increase to 23,000 vehicles per day, which is an increase of about 58%. So you can spend more time looking at this exhibit and the numbers and what the increases are projected to be. Moving on to the next exhibit, we're going to talk about capacity. So this is really addressing congestion, right? The ability to move cars through the corridor and people. So there's a lot of information on this exhibit, and what you see here in the bubble outs, we're evaluating each major intersection, and we're evaluating them for 3 conditions. One is for existing traffic. So how does the intersection perform today? Then we look at, well, what if we factor in the projected traffic and we make no improvements? So basically do nothing, but the traffic continues to grow. What does that look like? How does the intersection perform? And then the last number, the last scenario we look at is, what does the improvement do to the intersection with future traffic? So projected traffic with the proposed improvements. So those are the 3 numbers that you can see here. The results of the analysis for each main intersection is shown in the bubble outs. And to provide some information on what capacity is, it's usually capacity, we measure it by what we call level of service. And that's essentially assigning a letter grade rating, A being best through F being worst, that represents the average amount of delay experienced at the intersection. A level of service C, which is in the middle here, down here, is usually, that's what we aim for when we design a project. So we don't aim for an A, we aim for designing a project to obtain a level of service of a C. And so, an intersection, the intersections within the project study area currently have, under existing conditions, have a level service C, E, or F, depending on where you're at. And so you can go through the box and you can see we assign the color, which correlates to, an E or an F is red, a C or a D is yellow, and an A or B is green. So you can quickly just take a quick glance at the exhibit and see how the intersections perform today, and then what we're proposing, what our proposed improvement is doing to make them better. So overall, one of the main takeaways of this analysis is that if no improvements are made by the year 2040, all intersections are projected to decline to a level service F. Delay is projected to increase by nearly 300%, so 3-fold in the PM rush hour. With the proposed improvements, if we make them, the intersections at nearly all intersections will obtain a level service C. The only exception to that is Southwest Highway, which will be a level service D. And addressing capacity is one of the primary project needs as indicated by this analysis. Moving on, the next thing we take a look at is crash analysis. So we want to understand where are the injury crashes occurring. So we obtain data from the Illinois Department of Transportation and all the crashes that occur. So we look at a 5-year window, the last 5 years, to identify crash patterns and formulate countermeasures to address any safety issues. So overall, there are 490 crashes from 2014 to 2018, which resulted in 94 injuries, or 19% of the total crashes. There were also no fatalities within this project corridor. The predominant crash type is rear end, which composes about 65% of the total crashes. Turning, which are vehicles, if you're making a left-hand turn and you collide with an oncoming vehicle, that consists about 15% of the total crashes. And then fixed object, meaning if you crash into a power pole, a light pole, or a tree or something of that nature, those consist of about 7% of the crashes. The highest representation, the rear end crash, is commonly associated with congestion, specifically around signalized intersections, and also the lack of turn lanes along the corridor. The recommended countermeasures from the crash analysis are to improve the pavement and drainage conditions, add through lanes in median or center turn lane, add auxiliary turn lanes at intersections, so left or right turn lanes, and improve sight distance along the project. Obviously, this corridor has some rolling terrain. So there's some hills within the project corridor. So we want to take a look at sight distance. And on this exhibit, a legend is provided over here. And you'll see below here a heat map. So this is all 490 crashes on this exhibit, this heat map. And so we assign a circle, and that circle, those circles are associated with crash types. So we have different injury crash types, an A injury, a B injury, a C injury, and then the little orange dot are PDO, property damage only. So that was a crash that had no injuries. we really focus on the injury crashes and specifically any fatal crashes, which we don't have any, but the type A. So those are incapacitating injuries where someone has to go to the hospital. So very serious crash. And those are indicated by the yellow circles. And real quickly, looking at this heat map, you can see where those crashes occur. We have 14 of them. Most of them are around the Southwest Highway intersection. And there's also a cluster here near Ridge Avenue. And if you, just east of Crystal Tree. And that is the location of there's a little hill there. So that's something we take a look at. And there's also a few type A crashes at the Wolf Road intersection. So there's a lot of information on this exhibit that you can look at in more detail. Looking at the existing conditions. So this shown here is an exhibit of the existing conditions. And there's a ton of information on here and on this exhibit, which we won't go through all right now, all at this time. But simply to explain the exhibit, along the bottom, you'll see diagrams of the existing intersection configurations. So we have each of the 5 main intersections, Wolf Road, 108th Avenue, Crystal Tree, West Avenue, and then Union Street and Southwest Highway. Above that are 2 typical sections, and that's really showing the existing roadway at those 2 points, which indicate really that there's 1 lane in each direction along 143rd Street for a portion of the corridor, and also as we know, as we go east, there's a sidewalk. So this is really just showing the existing conditions in a simple way. Along the top is an aerial view of the project corridor showing locations of signalized intersections, floodplain in blue, which you can see here, wetlands, which are in darker blue. Those are a little bit closer to the roadway. You can see some over there. Public lands in green. We know we have the forest preserve over here. Historic properties in purple. You can see some purple properties over here in the Old Orland area, Old Orland Historic District. And then we also have some line work on here to show existing sidewalks. So a blue line means the existing sidewalk. A dashed blue lines mean there is no sidewalk. We also show region paths in orange. So these are solid orange lines are existing paths. The key aspects of this exhibit, moving from west to east here, are that we have, we have signals at Wolf Road, 108th, West Avenue, Union Street, and Southwest Highway. We have floodplain crossing the roadway between Wolf Road and 108th Avenue in this area over here. We have forest preserve along the north side of 143rd Street from about Old Tamarack Lane to Southwest Highway. And we also have a variety of historic properties, predominantly within the Old Orland Historic District near Southwest Highway, between West Avenue and Southwest Highway over here. Now moving on to the proposed improvement information. Again, you'll see the same exhibit layout as we had before, but now focusing on the proposed improvements. And as the prior exhibit, there's a lot of information on here. Along the bottom, you will see a diagram again of the existing intersections. This time, we're adding in the proposed lanes that are being added at the intersections in orange. So for example, at Wolf Road, you can see we're adding a second through lane in each direction in the east-west direction. So you'll see the second orange arrow, which means we're adding another lane. So that is along the bottom. So you can see real quickly the lanes that are being added at the intersections. The gray indicate the existing lanes that are going to remain. Some of the key items to point out starting at Wolf Road are a second northbound through lane in each direction. So you can see here the orange arrows on Wolf Road. So we are adding a second northbound and southbound through lane on Wolf Road. Right turn lanes are being added on the north, south, and west legs. So the takeaway there is we're making a pretty substantial improvement at the Wolf Road intersection. We are adding a new signal. There's one not there currently at Crystal Tree. Also, at the Union Street intersection and Southwest Highway intersections, we will be consolidating those 2 intersections into 1 signal. So we will be making a simplification of those intersections to try and help operations. Looking at the typical sections here, you will see the same diagrams that you saw in the prior exhibit, but now looking at the proposed improvements. So the first, so for the first one over here for 100, the section between Wolf Road and 108th Avenue, you can see we're adding a second lane in each, another lane in each direction. We'll have a barrier median with brakes in the barrier median for left turn lanes to local side streets, such as Deer Haven, Old Tamarack Lane. The typical section also shows to the right over here, you will see that we have a bi-directional turn lane. So that's a flush median instead of a barrier. And that's really due to the close proximity of all of the side streets over here. We want to be able to provide left turn lane full access to all of those side streets, as well as some of the driveways along 143rd Street. For both of these, you will see that we have sidewalk, a continuous sidewalk along the south side, and a bike path along the north side. Also, for the entire improvement, we're going to provide curb and gutter for the entire project limits with new storm sewer and drainage, with a new storm sewer and drainage system. Along the top of the exhibit, you'll see the proposed improvement, which it's really hard to see any detail there, but we want to draw your attention to all the bubble outs, the call outs. And those are really highlighting the main features of the proposed improvement. I'm going to highlight a few of those right now. So starting at the west over here, you could see the little brown bubble out there. That is indicating a proposed noise wall. We're going to be including a 400-foot long noise wall along the north side of 143rd Street between Compton Court and Wolf Road. More information on this proposed noise wall will be provided shortly on another exhibit. Between Wolf Road and 108th Avenue, the roadway elevation is being raised up to 5 feet to provide flood protection. And last year, this portion of 143rd Street was closed due to roadway pavement flooding. And overall, that's really something that's just focused for about 1,000 feet in between the intersections where we're making that raise. And that's where we have the floodplain currently. Northeast of the Wolf Road intersection, you'll see a brown area and a blue call out over here. And so what this area is indicating is a proposed compensatory storage, floodplain compensatory storage site, which is an area that we're proposing to do grading for the fill in the floodplain. So to make this, to provide this flood protection, we have to raise the road, which means we have to fill in dirt in the floodplain. Per guidelines, we need to compensate for that. So we need to excavate out and do some grading to make up for that fill in the floodplain. So the objective there is to not make flooding worse with the project. So that is something we want to avoid. We want to help drainage and make drainage improvements, not make them worse. So that is an area that we're proposing for compensatory storage. This is a village-owned property. And with following the regrading of this area, we will restore this area to a natural state with native plantings, similar to what you would see in the adjacent wetlands. Moving to the east, we're proposing, as I mentioned, a new signal at Crystal Tree Drive. Between Ridge Avenue and West Avenue, we're proposing a flush median, bi-directional turn lane. Also in this area, we have the Forest Preserve District to the north. And so what we're doing there is we're really installing a retaining wall along the entire north side of the roadway, and we're shifting the roadway as far north as possible to minimize impacts to properties along the south side of the roadway. This was a key design focus for us to really focus on, because it's an older part of town and the homes are a little bit closer to the roadway. So we really want to try and minimize impacts in that area. We paid close attention. We also know there's some drainage issues sporadically along there as well with water collecting in people's front yards or on the roadway. So, that's an area of focus that we really tried to minimize impacts to the extent we can. Moving further to the east, we're consolidating the Union Street and Southwest Highway intersections. It's a substantial intersection improvement from what's out there today. And another element that we're doing as part of this project is reconfiguring and expanding the 143rd Street Metra Station Southwest Highway commuter lot. And we're adding essentially 253 new stalls at that location as part of this project. So overall, that's a summary of the main takeaways there of the proposed improvement for the project. Moving on, these are typical sections. So this is showing, taking a slice, of the roadway at certain locations along the project. So imagine you're standing in the middle of the road and you're looking east. You're standing in the middle of the roadway and looking east. So the left side is north and the right side is to the south. So within this typical section, you will notice this is, again, focusing on the area between Wolf Road and 108th Avenue. You will notice that raise of the road. You will see retaining walls on both sides of the roadway, and that is to minimize, we have wetlands on both sides as well as floodplains. We want to minimize impacts to those elements. We have bike path, sidewalk over here. You can see the barrier median. Moving on, this is a typical section between Ridge Avenue and West Avenue. Again, the existing roadway is 2 lanes. In some areas, as you approach West Avenue, it widens out to 3 lanes. We have curb and gutter in this area existing and an existing sidewalk on the south side. We have the Forest Preserve District over to the north, over here. And we have our residential area, residential properties over here on the south. Looking at the proposed improvement, you can see that we're installing, like I mentioned before, that retaining wall along the north side adjacent to the Forest Preserve. We have to have a little gap there for future maintenance. So we need to allow people to walk behind the wall to inspect it and to maintain it. You can see the bike path, the curb and gutter here and here, and then the center bidirectional turn lane. So that can be used for folks that want to turn left to head south on all the local side streets. We have the sidewalk over here on the south side, as well as a drainage swale next to the sidewalk. So you could see in this area, there is proposed property acquisition. You could see the existing right-of-way right here, and then you could see there's proposed right-of-way. So, and that's something, for this whole corridor, this varies drastically throughout the whole corridor as far as where we need to acquire property for the proposed improvement. And we'll talk about land acquisition in a little bit and property acquisition. So on the virtual public meeting website, we have detailed proposed improvement exhibits that look like this. And they are on there to review. So that is, we want to try and convey to the best we can in this virtual environment, the proposed improvement. So we have call outs indicating all the different design features, such as what the property acquisition is going to be, where the retaining walls are at, where the barrier medians are at, where the full access intersections are at. This little example here, the snippet of one of the exhibits is at Old Tamarack Lane. You could see Crystal Tree here on the south, the golf course, Old Tamarack Lane here on the north, the Forest Preserve District property over here at the northeast portion. Right now, I just want to highlight some of these key features. So the purpose of this slide is really to help people understand what these exhibits are showing. We have a legend on all of the exhibits. And sorry, to take one step back, on the public meeting website, we have a total of 5 exhibits that cover the 143rd Street corridor to this level of detail. We have 1 exhibit for Wolf Road, and we have 1 exhibit for Southwest Highway. So on all of those exhibits, we have a legend. And so in this legend, you really want to look at that before you start taking a peek at the exhibit so you can understand what the different lines mean. Some of the key features to understand are the existing right-of-way and proposed right-of-way. So the existing right-of-way being in red. So that is the property that, the village or the IDOT currently owns for roadway and utility purposes. This little line here, this dashed thicker line, is an existing permanent easement. And we'll cover what an easement is in a little bit. But essentially that's an easement is over private property, and a utility agency or a roadway agency such as IDOT might have some rights to use that land. So if it's a cable line or a telephone line that's buried, that could be located on private property, but that utility company might have an easement to access that piece of infrastructure, but the property is still privately owned. The other next key feature is this pink line. This is the proposed right-of-way. So this is indicating the property that needs to be permanently acquired as part of the roadway improvement project. The next feature is our proposed permanent easements in purple here. We just covered easement. So on this exhibit, you could see a permanent easement in this location here. So we're proposing a permanent easement in this area. It's really focused on drainage, drainage needs. And that's typically what proposed easements are really needed for, is drainage features. So we want to either provide swales or ditches. So there's some regrading of that area. And we want to make sure that if there's any water that's coming off a site and coming towards the road, that we provide a ditch or a swale to convey that water to the appropriate spot, the appropriate location. So for this example, we would have a ditch over here, and that ditch is flowing to the east into the Forest Preserve District property. The other elements to see here are proposed temporary easements in orange. Proposed temporary easement you could see here. So these are temporary uses of property that we need to either do some grading, and it's just a temporary use during construction. So after construction's over, we have then no rights to access that property any further. So that is either, like I said, trying to mesh the project with the private adjacent properties. Next, retaining walls. You will see retaining walls in like a purple line style. So an example is right here. You'll see that purple line. That is a proposed retaining wall. You could see for this example, we have retaining walls proposed on both sides of Old Tamarack Lane along the north side. And we are introducing these retaining walls at I think 33 different locations along the project to minimize property impacts. In this case, we're installing a retaining wall to avoid impacts to the existing parking lot on the north here, northeast corner of Old Tamarack Lane. You can see the median type, barrier median over here. So you can see the curb and gutter. On this specific exhibit, we don't have callouts to that, but typically in the exhibits, we have callouts for all of these elements. And the other element we have is construction limit in yellow. So this is right now, as of the preliminary engineering design, and this will change as the project proceeds through the design process, where we anticipate the construction occurring. So the proposed grading. So this is the area that we're anticipating. So anything within that area would potentially be impacted. So if that's a tree, you could see a tree symbol right here. Those trees would unfortunately be impacted. So this is one of the main elements and features of the next phase of design, is focusing on these design details as far as the grading and the sidewalk and bike path, and can we avoid any tree impacts. So we dive into a greater level of detail during the next phase of engineering to look at those things. But this is currently the information we have right now to share. So, but please understand, this will change as the project proceeds through design. So we're not going to go through the entire project corridor right now. So we'd be here for probably another 3 hours to go through that. But we want people to go to the project website and take a look at these proposed detailed exhibits and take a look at them, see if you have any questions, if you have concerns about the design. We want to hear that. Those are the things we really want to know at this stage of the project, towards the end of phase one, where we're still making design changes, we're still making tweaks to the project. So that's what we're really encouraging people to do, and is really one of the main focuses of our public engagement activity here tonight, towards the end of the project. Moving on to the retaining wall. I mentioned before that we have a proposed retaining wall at the far west end of our project. You can see Compton Court over here. This is within the Courtyards subdevelopment. We have a proposed noise wall over here. It's about 400 feet long, 10 feet in height, and the location is shown in blue along this line. The yellow properties are those that are benefited by this noise wall. So those are the folks that will receive a noise reduction of 5 decibels or greater. And we had a meeting with these folks, these 9 folks with the village to have a noise forum. And we discussed the noise analysis results and that there was a proposed noise wall in this location of the project. The key thing to understand is we did a noise analysis for the entire project study area, following state and federal policies and procedures. And this was the only location that warranted a noise wall. And once a noise wall is warranted, we then take that to the people it benefits, and they can vote. whether or not they want it or not. And in this case, in the meeting in June, after the meeting, we held a vote, and a majority of the folks that voted in favor of including the wall in the project. So, based on that vote, we are now including that noise wall as part of the proposed improvement. If you would like more information on the traffic and noise analysis for the whole project area, that detailed report is on the virtual public meeting website. There's a link to that report, which goes into detail of all the areas we looked at. Moving on to the next station, land acquisition. We want to, at this stage, talk about the land acquisition process, what that means, as well as talk about proposed property acquisition and proposed use from the Forest Preserve District and the historic properties. And those two, the Forest Preserve District and historic properties, are afforded certain protections under federal and state regulations. This exhibit, there's quite a bit of information on here. On the left, you will see a definition of the 3 different types of property acquisition. Fee simple acquisition, which what we call in our exhibits is right of way. So that's the acquisition of all rights and interest in real property. So that is permanently buying property. Permanent easements, where where folks still own the underlying property, but someone has access to it permanently during and after the construction of the project. So that would be, in this case, the village or IDOT would have permanent access rights for either like drainage elements or drainage structures. Then there is the last category, which is temporary easements, where underlying ownership is retained by the property owner, but access is temporarily allowed during construction for items such as grading, driveway construction and replacement, or other minor improvements. Like I said, overall, we have 33 retaining walls that are proposed throughout the project limits to try and minimize property acquisition. It's really one of our main focuses and objectives is to minimize that to the extent we can. Unfortunately, with this old of a corridor and with the proposed improvement, we have acquisition proposed from 81 total properties, so quite a few here. We have fee simple acquisition of 2.7 acres from 46 properties, permanent easement acquisition of 6.11 acres from 37 properties, and temporary easements from 9 acres from 71 properties. And a majority of those temporary easements are really needed at the Southwest Highway Metra commuter parking lot. The village does not own that property, but we need a temporary construction easement. So about half of that is due to that specific element. And then land acquisition, we follow Federal Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Act. And so we follow federal procedures. And as of right now, typically the land acquisition, is anticipated to begin once funding is identified. We mentioned that currently we don't have funding for land acquisition, but we're targeting that to begin in 2023 or early 2024. If you would like more information on the land acquisition process, we have links on the project website to a Federal Highway Administration brochure about land acquisition, as well as a website that provides their website that has a lot more information. And one of the key things is that we're here to answer questions and talk about these specific issues. We know this means property acquisition is something that we want to make sure everyone understands. Ahead of this meeting, we sent an exhibit, a certified mailing to each one of the 81 properties with a zoomed in exhibit of the proposed acquisition, along with the project brochure and a comment form. And so we're really wanting those folks to reach out to us at this stage of the project where we're still looking at design tweaks and helping people understand, understand the proposed improvements. As part of the proposed improvement, we have proposed use of the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, McGinnis Slough. And with that, we must obtain federal approval, and that's afforded protections, technical thing here under Section 4F of the Department of Transportation Act of 1966. The Village of Orland Park is seeking public comments on the Forest Preserve property at 7 locations for a total of 0.51 acres of permanent easements and 0.51 acres of temporary easements. And this exhibit provides a lot of detail about the location and impacts of the easements. This is an overall exhibit showing that. We have a link on the website that has detailed information and documentation about the proposed use from the Forest Preserve District. So we have much more detailed zoomed in exhibits. A key thing to understand is in 2011, the village obtained a 17-foot easement from the Forest Preserve along the north side for the future widening of 143rd Street. And we are using every bit of that 17 feet that we can for the project. So these are additional easements on top of that 17-foot one the village already has obtained. And so we intend to seek a de minimis finding from the Federal Highway Administration for this proposed use that we don't adversely affect the features, attributes, and activities qualifying this property under protection of the US DOT Act, Section 4F. And we're seeking comments from the public on this proposed use. Similarly, we need to obtain a similar approval for for historic properties. And so we have a variety of historic properties. 7 we need to have proposed acquisition from. Majority of those are in the Old Orland Historic District. And again, they are afforded certain protections, federal protections under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act and Section 4F of the US DOT Act that we just talked about. We have a total of 0.17 acres of permanent easements or right-of-way and 0.5 acres of temporary construction easements from historic properties. So this is a summary exhibit showing those locations. They are highlighted in blue. And so you'll see one over here at the Wolf Road intersection, the Yunker Schoolhouse. There's one residential property near Highland, I believe, Highland Avenue. And then we have the remaining 4 over here in the Old Orland Historic District. So again, more detailed information on the proposed use of the historic properties is located on the project meeting website. I am done talking. So I'm sorry that took a little bit longer than I anticipated to get through. So with this, we're going to transition into the comment and question submittal. So for and before I jump into that, this slide right here explains how people can submit comments during the public meeting comment period. So we're looking for comments from folks by January 11th to be included in the public meeting record. As I mentioned before, we are always taking questions and comments. So after January 11th, if there's still questions and comments, we're going to answer those questions and comments at any time throughout the project. But right now, we're seeking this obtain comments specific to the proposed improvement in this public meeting. So like I said, you can submit comments via the project website. You can submit a comment form, which can be downloaded on the website. We also did about 500 mailings to folks that live along the corridor and around the corridor. You can mail that in, email that in. Instructions are located on that, as well as make comments tonight at tonight's meeting, either verbally or written.